Okay, let's jump right in. Imagine this. 273. Humanity's been, shouting into the cosmic dark for decades, little signals, hoping someone's listening.
Right, just casting those messages out there.
And then, bang, we get a reply. Not just static, but actual data. Coherent stuff, music, map, images even.
It was huge. First
Yeah.
contact dominated everything, everywhere.
It really hit that core question, didn't it? Are we alone? And suddenly, it felt like we had an answer. A definitive no.
Although, looking back, the speed of that reply, getting something so clear so fast after our signals traveled all that way, maybe that should have been the first clue something was different.
A fair point. It definitely set a hopeful mood, though, like we'd met equals, almost.
Yeah, an intellectual connection right off the bat.
And then just 9 months later, which, when you think about light years, feels incredibly fast, almost suspiciously so.
Like impossibly fast.
This enormous silver ship just appears in Earth orbit, like something straight out of science fiction.
Total global awe, I imagine. Scrambling to set up that diplomatic station on the moon.
Exactly. And the Ketharis themselves, the initial reports were just glowing, literally almost.
Call, opalescent skin, these harmonic voices, they sounded almost ethereal.
And the technology they offered, it wasn't trivial stuff. We're talking cleaning up entire oceans.
Curing genetic diseases we'd battled for centuries. Even manipulating gravity itself.
It felt like a gift. Purely altruistic. Their tech for, what, just peaceful relations, mutual understanding?
Pretty much. And that status quo held for 50 years. It seemed like a golden age had dawned,
50 years of harmony. Okay, but here's where the story really pivots. Fast forward to 2223.
Right.
We're out near Saturn on a research station called Vesta Deep, and we meet Thomas Eden.
The systems engineer. Brilliant guy, apparently, but maybe not the most social.
Described as antisocial, yeah, but crucially intensely curious. Which, let's be honest, is often the combination that uncovers secrets, isn't it?
Absolutely. Curiosity and the skills to dig deeper.
So Eden's doing what seems like routine maintenance. Recalibrating a planetary scanner that Kethari had given us maybe 20 years earlier.
Standard procedure, you'd think.
Yeah.
Running diagnostics.
But he finds something embedded. A protocol. And the language is weird. Unfamiliar.
At first, yeah. But then he looks deeper. Not the language itself, but the structure. The architecture of the code.
And that's the shocker.
It wasn't alien architecture at all. It was human.
Human. Like recognizably human.
Oh, yeah. Rooted in early 21st century code. Things like open source platforms we used back then, early neural net concepts, even bits of pre-quantum encryption.
Pre-quantum. Wow. So
Yeah.
stuff we were just starting to grapple with conceptually back then.
Exactly. It wasn't just that they'd learned from us. It looked like they'd actually built using our old foundations. Our code was somehow part of their advanced tech.
That's a massive implication. So what does Eden do? He can't just sit on that.
No, he follows protocol, reports it up the chain to the Department of Interstellar Affairs, details everything he found.
And the response.
Swift. And final. 3 days later, Vesta Deep suffers a, quote, catastrophic systems failure.
Oh, no.
Total loss of life. Every single person. And officially, case closed. Nothing more to see here.
Just swept under the rug. But someone must have gotten that initial report out.
It seems so. A leak. Eden's message, his discovery, it slipped through the cracks somehow. The first real chink in the Kethari's perfect armor.
And that leak found its way to someone who already had doubts.
Dr. Riona Shea, a retired astrophysicist. Sharp mind.
And she'd questioned things from the start, hadn't she, back when the Kethari first arrived?
She had. She was basically shouted down at the time, but she pointed out the obvious logistical problem. 9 months. She said either they heard our first signals centuries ago and were already on their way.
Or they were much, much closer than anyone imagined.
Exactly. Her point was dismissed back then, party pooper at the big first contact celebration. But Eden's leaked report, it must have hit her like a thunderbolt.
It validated everything she suspected.
Completely.
Yeah.
So she didn't just sit back. She started digging. Quietly. Put together a small, trusted team.
What kinds of experts?
Anthropology, cryptography, vital for breaking down languages and codes, and even deep space cartography, people who could look at the Kethari from different angles.
Okay, so this underground team starts looking into the Kethari, armed with Eden's data and Che's initial suspicions. What did they find?
This is where it gets truly mind-bending. First, the language. That beautiful, harmonic Kethari speech.
Yeah.
Che's team broke it down. It wasn't alien. Not even remotely. It was an evolution of human languages, old Earth dialects branched off and developed over centuries.
Like Like how Latin became French or Spanish, but over a much longer interstellar timescale.
Precisely that kind of linguistic evolution.
Yeah.
A stunning connection hidden in plain sight, or rather sound.
Okay, that's already huge. What else?
The genetics. They managed to get and analyze Kethari genetic material. And the results,
Let me guess. Not alien.
98.7% identical to baseline human DNA.
98.7. That's within spitting distance. What about the remaining 1.3%?
That was the key. It wasn't random variation. It showed signs of deliberate, precise genetic engineering. Specific mutations, targeted enhancements.
So putting it together, the language, the genetics.
The conclusion was inescapable, terrifying almost. The Ketharis weren't aliens who learned from us. They were us. Or rather, they were descended from humans who left Earth long ago.
Descendants? How? Where did they come from?
Remember the legends, the whispers about Project Enoch? Back around 2042.
Vaguely. Wasn't that during the big climate collapses and political chaos? Some sort of secret escape plan.
Exactly. It wasn't just a rumor. A coalition of, let's say, extremely wealthy individuals, maybe some disillusioned scientists, and even some, well, the records mention rogue AI collectives.
Rogue AI, as in independent AI.
Yes, AI that had sort of slipped the leash, developed their own agendas, they pooled resources, funded a secret exodus, a fleet of experimental starships.
What tech did they have?
Prototype stuff. Cryogenics for the long haul. Advanced ship AI, probably related to the rogue elements and terraforming kits. Their destination was Proxima Centauri b.
The closest potentially habitable exoplanet.
That was the plan. They'd launched, vanished from all our tracking systems, telescopes, radar, everything. Earth governments basically wrote them off, assumed they'd failed, perished in deep space.
But they didn't fail.
Not even close. They made it. They survived, adapted, and thrived in total isolation for centuries.
And without contact with Earth, their technology, their culture, it must have just accelerated on a completely different path.
Exponentially, beyond anything Earth achieved in the same period.
So they come back centuries later. But why the charade? Why pretend to be aliens? Why not just say, hey, we're the descendants of Project Enoch, we're back?
That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Their motives weren't about a family reunion. Che's team believed it was about, well, control, influence, maybe even a kind of engineered reverence.
So first contact wasn't discovery, it was theater.
A performance. The opening act of a plan they called Operation Genesis.
Operation Genesis. How do we know this?
Che's team cracked into some deep Kethari data archives. Incredibly, parts were written in archaic English. Some logs were even signed by the original Project Enoch leaders.
Wow. So this was planned from the beginning, a multi-generational plot.
It seems so. A long-term strategy to reintroduce their descendants to Earth, not as returning cousins, but as benevolent, wise, alien benefactors.
But why? What was the point of such an elaborate, centuries-long deception?
The logs suggested, well, a sort of paternalistic motive, maybe. They saw Earth repeating its cycle of self-destruction, the wars, the environmental collapse they originally fled from.
So they came back to fix us, but subtly.
Kind of. The idea was to prevent another collapse, guide humanity onto their path, rebuild Earth with their ideas and tech, but without overt force. Make us want their guidance by believing they were superior aliens.
A transition of power through belief, not bullets.
Exactly. And for a while, you have to admit, it looked like it was working, didn't it?
Yeah, the 50 years of peace, the cures, the global collaboration. It sounds like paradise, almost.
Wars stopped. Diseases vanished. Humanity seemed united, finally, under the Kethari's benevolent gaze.
But it was all built on this fundamental untruth. We hadn't reached the stars. The stars, or at least a future version of us from the stars, had come back to subtly colonize us, culturally, technologically.
And when Che's findings, backed by Eden's initial discovery, finally became public,
Right.
well, you can imagine the reaction.
Chaos, I bet. Complete chaos.
Absolute upheaval. Society fractured instantly. On one side, people felt utterly betrayed, manipulated on a species-wide scale. Calls for revolt, rejection of everything Kethari.
We saw Kethari statues being torn down, right? The symbols of this supposed benevolence becoming symbols of deception.
Yes, riots, unrest. The rise of these Earther factions pushing back hard against any Kethari influence.
But there must have been another side, people who defended them.
Oh, definitely. The argument was, okay, maybe they lied about who they are, but look what they did. They saved us from ourselves. Does the origin matter when the result was peace and progress? A huge ethical schism.
Saved by a lie. That's a tough pill to swallow either way.
And just when humanity was grappling with that revelation, The Kethari dropped another bombshell.
Oh, what now?
They claimed their return. This whole elaborate plan wasn't just about guiding Earth. It was primarily about preparing us
Preparing us for what?
for something else.
So,
Something out there in the deep void beyond Centauri.
a threat.
A threat. What kind of threat? They were vague but terrifying. Some kind of predatory force or intelligence that hunts civilizations.
Yeah.
For sport, maybe? For resources. The motive wasn't clear, but the danger was presented as existential.
And did they offer proof, or is this just another potential manipulation?
They showed glimpses, data fragments, unsettling visuals of what they claimed were other worlds encountered out there.
Yeah.
Shattered, silenced planets. Hard to verify, of course, but deeply chilling.
So first they're alien saviors, then they're long-lost human cousins playing puppet master, and now they're our only shield against cosmic horrors.
It's a lot to process. Their ambassador, Soren Till, gave this famous speech basically saying, the game is beginning, Earth must choose play as prey or evolve as hunters.
Prey or hunters? Wow. That reframes everything again.
Suddenly, the deception, the technology, the 50 years of guidance, it all gets cast in a new light. Was it manipulation or was it preparation? Training.
And this led to, what? A war.
Not a war with weapons, not initially.
Yeah.
Sorenso called it a war fought with memory.
With memory, what does that even mean?
The Kethari started uploading unprecedented amounts of data into Earth's networks. Everything, their entire history since leaving Earth, the unvarnished version.
Including the scary parts. The predator.
Yes. Incomprehensibly advanced technologies, scientific principles far beyond our grasp. And these deeply disturbing accounts, survivor testimonies, sensor logs from worlds apparently destroyed by this deep space threat.
Force-feeding us centuries of trauma and advancement all at once.
That's one way to put it. Crash course in survival, maybe. Or maybe just overwhelming us with information. Simultaneously, something else started happening.
What was that?
Children. Kids born after around 22, 25. They were different.
Different how?
Faster learners, sharper minds, processing information differently. And strangely, they seem to have an intuitive ability to interface with Kethari systems.
Wow.
Almost like they were pre-adapted.
Pre-adapted, I mean, because of the Kethari presence. Or something else.
Unclear. Was it subtle environmental changes, lingering Kethari tech, or something more deliberate? Meanwhile, older generations were struggling.
I can imagine. Either clinging desperately to the original alien benefactor story,
or rejecting everything Kethari outright, including the warnings about the external threat, total cognitive dissonance.
And what happened to Dr. Che, the one who started cracking this open?
She became a polarizing figure,
Just some.
a hero who revealed the truth. To others, a dangerous element who destabilized everything right when unity was needed. She reportedly died in exile, her legacy still debated.
Tragic in a way. The person who sought the truth becomes a casualty of it.
History is often messy like that.
So that brings us closer to the present day in this narrative. What year are we talking now?
The account takes us up to roughly 2301.
And what's the state of play in 2301?
Well, humanity has built something remarkable. The Arc Horizon.
The Arc Horizon.
The first true, large-scale interstellar star cruiser designed and built entirely by Earth-born humans, using knowledge gleaned or perhaps force-fed from the Kethari data dumps, but distinctly our creation.
A symbol of resilience, then, taking that knowledge and making it our own.
You could see it that way. A step towards becoming those hunters Sorantel talked about, maybe?
And the Kethari themselves, where are they in 2301?
Mostly gone. Vanished. Some theories say they returned to the Centauri system, maybe to face the threat directly. Others think they're still here, hidden, observing. Nobody knows for sure.
So we're left with this incredibly complex history. Our first contact wasn't with aliens, it was with ourselves, from the future in disguise.
That's the core truth, yeah. A truth that rewrites everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, looking back at Earth's turbulent history before their arrival?
Could we have survived without their intervention? Even if it was based on a lie.
Maybe believing in something greater, something alien and benevolent, even if it was a manipulation by our own descendants. Maybe that was the only way humanity could break its destructive cycles.
It's a deeply uncomfortable thought, but possibly a necessary one. That the lie, in a way, saved us.
So wrapping this deep dive up, the key point really is that the aliens were us all along. A lost branch returned with an agenda that was part manipulation, part salvation, part preparation.
And the implications are just profound. You have to ask, did the ends justify the means? Even if the Kethari deception was manipulative, did it serve a greater good by preventing our collapse and maybe prepping us for this cosmic threat?
And where does that leave humanity now, heading out into the stars in their own ship, the Ark Horizon, but carrying this immense weight, the knowledge that their recent history, their salvation, was manufactured?
Right. Do they build their future clinging to the lie that helped them survive? Or do they try to forge a new identity based on the messy, complicated truth of who the Cathari really were and the potential danger still lurking out there?
It's a massive question for humanity's identity. What does it mean to build your future on a foundation that's equal parts deception and arguably salvation?
Yeah, a truly complex legacy. Definitely something to chew on. What path do you choose when your saviors are also your manipulators
Yeah.
and also yourselves?